Yeah, I presented lots of facts for atheism being the position that that theism has failed to make its claim. That's what
All you've
atheism is.
No, it's not. But
Yeah, yes, it is. I'm on the board of
atheism is
directors for American Atheists. I probably know what my
you
position
should
is a little
resign.
bit better than you.
What is going on, everybody? Glad you made it, because this one genuinely kept me up thinking about it after I finished watching. We are looking at a full live debate between Aron Ra and Perspective Philosophy on what is honestly one of the most fundamental questions you can put two people in a room to argue about. Which side actually has more evidence, Christianity or atheism? Aron is a secular activist with decades of debate experience and a seat on the board of American Atheists. Perspective Philosophy comes in armed with formal Catholic philosophy, the principle of sufficient reason, and a PowerPoint. What unfolds between them is not just a back and forth about God, it is a collision over what the word evidence even means, and whether a philosophical argument can ever substitute for a verifiable fact. The moment toward the end of this reaction is one of the cleanest full-stop lines I have heard in any debate I have covered on this channel. So do yourself a favor and stay all the way through, because it earns its place. Quick thing before we start, drop your city or country in the comments right now. Seeing where this community is spread across the world genuinely never gets old for me. All right, let us get into it.
I'll ask you the question. Do you believe a God does not exist?
I am in the subset of people of atheists who do not believe in a God, who fall into the category of strong atheists who also have the belief that God does not exist. I do, because I've spent a quarter of a century arguing with people like yourself who only provide evidence that the God claim are all lies. Every one of them. Frauds, falsehoods, fallacies, that is all you have. Now, you've already exhibited a number of fallacies, and you have not exhibited any evidence whatsoever. You've given arguments instead of evidence, which is a common fallacy that all believers always do. I don't know why. Why can't you produce a fact? This is the debate. Is there more evidence? I gave you a list of evidence for atheism. You gave me a whiteboard, still blank, for Christianity. Give me a fact.
So you don't think that a syllogistic argument is evidence?
No. And evidence is a body of facts that are positively, which means objectively verifiable data, positively indicative of and or exclusively concordant with one available position or hypothesis over any other. That's it. That's what evidence is.
So, for example, if a mathematician was to try and give evidence for a proposition, let's say that 4 was a multiple of 2, and they would rely upon, let's say, a logical proof for that, so they would divide 4 by 2, and it would come back as 2, so it wouldn't have a remainder, so it would prove that it was a multiple of 2. Would that be evidence or not?
In mathematics, maybe. I don't know. I don't deal in mathematics. I also know that historians use a different definition than scientists do. But in science, the definition I gave is the one we use.
The point that's being made here is that if evidence can be logical and not only empirical through observation, then a transcendental argument. I did give you a transcendental argument, which is observable logic.
You gave me a circular argument, a logical fallacy.
How is it circular?
Because you're just simply assuming your conclusion. You have a circular argument routing back to the assumed conclusion. You declare that you by definitional fiat, that which begins to exist must have a cause, therefore God. The universe did not begin to exist, therefore not God. Are we done?
No, because it's the whole point is to say about contingent beings.
Okay,
so for example,
contingent then.
So a contingent being would be something which has to have a cause for its existence.
So God is contingent on human imagination?
You're saying that the universe does not have to have a cause for its existence.
If there was a cause, it wouldn't be a God. It certainly wouldn't be the Christian God. As I said, even if a God existed, it would not be the Christian God.
So there could be a cause for the universe.
There could be if the universe had a cause, but I don't think
it did. So the universe is contingent then.
Why would the universe? I don't think the universe had a beginning.
Right.
So there wouldn't be a cause. So if there's no beginning,
25 years. That is what Aron Ra brings into this room. Not a philosophy degree, not a PowerPoint. 25 years of sitting across from people exactly like perspective philosophy and watching the same pattern repeat itself every single time. Claims dressed up as evidence, arguments dressed up as facts, and a whiteboard that stays completely empty when the moment of truth arrives. And here's what makes this so significant. Aron is not making a philosophical counter-argument at this point. He is making a historical observation about a pattern he has witnessed across hundreds of conversations, every single one of them, frauds, falsehoods, and fallacies. Not sometimes, everyone. And perspective philosophy has just added another data point to that list. The whiteboard line is the moment you have to pause on. Aron gave a list. Perspective philosophy gave a whiteboard, still blank. That is the entire debate summarized in 2 sentences, and it is devastating because it is accurate. This is not a rhetorical flourish. It is a factual description of what has happened in this debate up to this point. You have to understand what question begging actually is and why Aron keeps returning to it. It is a logical fallacy where the conclusion of an argument is assumed within one of its premises. Aristotle documented it in prior analytics over 2,000 years ago. The idea that you cannot use what you are trying to prove as a reason to believe the proof. When perspective philosophy argues that a necessary being must exist and then identifies that necessary being as God, he has assumed the conclusion. The argument does not arrive at God. It starts there. And Aron catches this not once, but multiple times without perspective philosophy ever cleanly resolving it.
Then there's no cause. And if there was a cause, it still wouldn't be a God. And if there was a God, it still wouldn't be the Christian God.
The worst point is, even if the universe was absolutely self-caused, you wouldn't be able to argue against pantheism. Because all I could say...
I'm not arguing against pantheism.
But pantheism isn't atheism, so you wouldn't be able to put forward your argument.
Why not?
That's the whole point. Because
pantheism is not classical theology. It's not a personal God, for sure. It's not a magical anthropomorphic immortal.
But it's still a God.
No, it's not, because it's not a magical anthropomorphic immortal.
It is a being, which
it's not a being.
What do you mean it's not a being?
It's not. Spinoza.
Do you understand what pantheism is? Do you understand what pantheism is?
I thought so, yes. You, as Einstein put it, he believes in Spinoza's God, which can be revealed in the mathematics of nature, in the operations of the natural world. So he's not worshiping a being.
But Spinoza's not an atheist.
We should regard him as an atheist.
Spinoza's not an atheist.
That's what Einstein said. Was that
Einstein's wrong?
From your perspective,
I don't know what to tell you. Like, Einstein's wrong. Like, Spinoza's not an atheist.
Okay. All right. So I'm only going on pantheism. What Einstein said about Spinoza's God, how Einstein described it when he said that he was an atheist from the Christian perspective.
The doctrine for Spinoza is to identify God as an absolute substance. So it's a kind of like acosmism. It's not an atheism. It's basically to identify that which is everything is God.
Okay, so you've defined God out of existence.
No,
if everything is God, then nothing is God. So
we have to have something. The unity.
We have something that is God, and then we have to be able to distinguish that from that which is not God.
I'm not a pantheist. But okay. I'm saying if you were to adopt a pantheistic position, it would still be a God, which means it wouldn't be atheism, which means you would because it would be evidence against you, and it would.
The only pantheist I know of is, apart from Spinoza himself, is Einstein. Einstein's description contradicts what you just said. So I'm not going to argue from outside of somebody else's perspective. I'm not going to argue for pantheism. You're supposed to present evidence for Christianity.
I've presented
evidence for atheism, which is a ridiculous notion because I shouldn't have to. The atheism is the I don't believe you. Atheism is the statement that you have failed to justify your argument, and I maintain that you have still failed to justify your argument. So you should, in the position of producing evidence for Christianity, you should not be arguing for Spinoza's God, because that's not Christianity. And if Spinoza's God existed, that would still justify my atheism, because it's not a God. It's not a magical anthropomorphic immortal. So defend Christianity. Give me evidence, something we can both show to be true that is indicative of your position.
This section is where the philosophical escape route fully closes. Watch what perspective philosophy does here. The moment Aron corners the cosmological argument, perspective philosophy pivots to pantheism. He starts suggesting that even if a necessary being exists, it could be Spinoza's God. The universe as God, everything is God, nature as God. And this is the part that blows my mind. Because perspective philosophy walked into this debate to argue for Christianity. Not for deism, not for pantheism, not for Spinoza's philosophical conception of God as absolute substance, Christianity, with a specific God, a specific resurrection, a specific salvation framework. The moment he starts retreating into pantheism to avoid the evidence demand, he has already conceded that his original case cannot stand on its own. Now, Aron catches this immediately and names it, "You are not arguing for Christianity anymore. You are arguing for a generic, necessary being that could be anything. And Spinoza's God is not the Christian God." Even Einstein, who referenced Spinoza's God, described himself as an atheist from the Christian perspective. So the pantheism pivot does not save the Christian case, it abandons it. And here's what people don't realize about this exchange. Every time perspective philosophy changes the argument from Christianity to theism, from theism to deism, from deism to pantheism, he is implicitly acknowledging that the previous position could not be defended. Each retreat is a small concession. By the time Aron says, defend Christianity, give me evidence, or something we can both show to be true that is indicative of your position. Perspective. Philosophy has moved so far from Christianity that answering the original debate question has become impossible.
But what? Like the one, Spinoza's God is still God, like that. Like it's just a different way of conceiving of God.
Okay, so it's a God that isn't a God. All right, we just
no, it is a God.
Everything is God. That's what you said a moment ago. Everything is God, so there's no way to distinguish. So
I mean, pantheism. We would all be parts of a unit. No, because yes, but only because Spinoza is arguing from the point of divine simplicity, which I referenced earlier, which inspired Leibniz, which is that everything can be boiled down to an existence which is absolutely one with itself as a single united being. So that's why it's an absolute substance. So you wouldn't be God in himself. You would be an aspect or a part or a limited condition, a contingent being within God. So you wouldn't be God, but God would contain you. He would be the set which contains.
So we don't have a definition of God, which is
you're not understanding Spinoza, but that's fine. I was just explaining Spinoza.
But you're arguing now for deism, for pantheism, whatever. But you're not arguing.
I'm just saying no. I'm arguing that you didn't provide evidence for your position. You've only provided evidence against mine.
Atheism, that the claims that theists make are unjustified. I did not provide it. Yes, I did. In fact, I presented quite a lot that all of your various scriptures contradict each other. They've all been proven to be false. That there's no evidence of the supernatural, despite all these different claims. That faith healers fail. That exorcisms fail. All these different practices of the different claims of belief for different religions all fail. That specifically Christian beliefs or claims fail. That the logical arguments if you want to go past the evidence, you want to go to logical arguments. Well, then you want to say that God is infinitely good while he also created a hell so he can punish people indefinitely, mercilessly, absolute cruelty and infinite mercy, supposedly another logical contradiction, because he loves us, but he's going to judge us not for whether we're good or bad, but over whether we believe impossible claims from questionable sources on insufficient evidence. Yeah, I presented lots of facts for atheism being the position that theism has failed to make its claim. That's what atheism is.
No, it's not. But
yes, it is. I'm on the board of directors for American Atheists. I probably know what my position is a little bit better than you.
The closing stretch of this segment is where everything crystallizes into one clean statement that lands harder than any philosophical argument made in this entire exchange. But before we get there, look at what Aron lays out in the build-up. He goes through the full list one more time. Scriptures that contradict each other across traditions, supernatural claims that have been tested, faith healing, exorcism, every verifiable religious practice put to the scientific method, and every single one of them failing. Not most of them, all of them. And then the logical contradiction at the heart of the Christian concept of God itself, infinitely good, but created a system of infinite punishment, loves humanity but judges not on moral behavior, but on whether you accept an extraordinary claim from an ancient source. That is not a philosophical complaint. That is a description of an internal logical incoherence within the doctrine itself. And then the final moment, perspective philosophy pushes back on how Aron defines his own atheism after an entire debate in which perspective philosophy could not produce a single verifiable fact, could not defend the Trinity, retreated from Christianity into pantheism, and had his central argument identified as circular reasoning. He tries to tell Aron what Aron's position actually is, and Aron's response is the most efficient sentence in the entire debate. I am on the board of directors for American Atheists. I probably know what my position is a little bit better than you. That is not arrogance. That is the closing of an account. 25 years of debate experience, a leadership position in one of the most prominent secular organizations in the world, and a debate in which not one verifiable fact was produced on the other side. The credibility was earned, and it lands exactly the way it should, as a full stop. So what do you guys think of this? Leave your thoughts down in the comments. Please like and subscribe, and I will see you in the next video.